affairs for Intel here in Ohio. And Joanne Flores is my colleague who covers supplier diversity for the whole nation. So I'm going to give a brief update on our project, what we're doing in Ohio, and then turn it over to Joanne to speak in more detail about our supplier diversity efforts. So, what is Intel? And I always start with our purpose. Our purpose is to create world-changing technology that improves the life of every person on the planet. And I participated in a digital equity discussion this morning, and I think that purpose statement is key, both from a digital, bridging the digital divide, but also from a supplier diversity perspective. Our technology should lift everyone. We are based in California and have we're up to about 120,000 employees worldwide. About half of those are here in the US, and we have more than 7,000 suppliers across 46 states, including, hundreds of suppliers right here in Ohio already. So I mentioned California is our headquarters. Most of our R&D is done out of Oregon, and most of our high volume manufacturing in the US is out of Arizona. So I love this map because it shows two things. One, Ohio is our first greenfield investment in the US in about 40 years. So we are, the only thing in the Midwest. We're building the Silicon Heartland. But second, it shows the potential of growth. If you look at some of our other sites and where we've invested, the long-term potential for Ohio is even greater than the two fabs we've committed to. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So why are semiconductors important? They go into everything in our lives. The average person spends about 12 hours a day interacting with chips, from the computer that's running this slideshow to many of our vehicles, Internet of Things. A lot of appliances are connected to the internet, healthcare, diagnostics, energy, autonomous vehicles. Everything in our lives is more and more digital, and everything that's digital runs on a chip. So I mentioned earlier, we are investing $20 billion. We are building two leading edge fabs right here in central Ohio. So, about 2 hours southwest of Toledo. And once we are fully up and running with these two fabs, we'll have about 3,000 Intel jobs. It takes about 3 to 5 years to build two fabs like we're doing. So over the next 3 to 5 years, there'll be 7,000 construction jobs working to build it. And then we also anticipate about 40 or so suppliers to come to Ohio because we're here. And we also anticipate a number of our existing suppliers in Ohio to grow because we're here. So there's an estimated 10,000 indirect long-term jobs because of this first phase of investment. That also includes, restaurants and hotels around the site and more. So where are we in the process? We announced last January that we were coming to Ohio, and Ohio won out of 46 states, I think it was, that competed for this project. Thanks in large part to Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Husted and Jobs Ohio and the legislature for stepping up and competing. We have an incredible site that we took possession of in July. And that picture down in the bottom right is the rendering of what phase one will look like once it's complete. But I also love that aerial view because if you can imagine that, you see the two white buildings that look connected, they're actually two separate fabs, but the gray rectangle kind of down and to the right, if you imagine just mirroring that down and to the right, that would be phase two. If you imagine mirroring the two buildings down and to the left, that would be phase three, and then you'd fill in the square. So by the time the full site build out is 8 fabs or more. So what we've invested is hopefully just the beginning if we are successful in phase one and compete for future investments. We had President Biden here, Governor DeWine, a number of elected officials from across the state at our groundbreaking in September. We over the fall and winter dug these two basements called the sub-utility trenches. They're about 40 feet deep and 600 feet across. You can see a orange excavator there in the bottom. That's one of the largest excavators that exist, digging out those basements where the fabs will go. We have started, this was kind of the first time concrete touched Ohio soil with what's called the sub-utility mud mat. And then we had our first really big concrete pour, 1,500 cubic yards last week, actually. So we have 3 cranes on site now. And we put out some photos last week showing the continued progress on the site. You can see in this photo here, the individuals in their neon vests. That's people. So to give you a kind of a size of scale, they had one pour here, and then we're getting ready. I think we have one more this week and a few more. So this will continue throughout the summer and really throughout this year. Lots of different concrete pours in a large amount of concrete. And when we're built, this is what we'll look like. It's not if you drove by it, you might think it's a convention center. All of our work is done in a clean room environment, so it's not loud. It's not you might drive by it and not know it's there unless you knew what you were looking for. But we have 600,000 square feet of clean room space where we will our employees in what we call the bunny suit, which is a clean room suit, will help work on machinery that builds up atoms thick at a time, building these transistors onto the wafer. And I mentioned some of these earlier. So 3,000 high-tech Intel jobs. The simple breakdown of that is about 70% of those are technicians who will only need a 2-year associate's degree or less. We are actually working on a 1-year credential for our technicians here in Ohio, and some of those programs are being stood up as we speak. About 25% of that 3,000 person workforce will be engineers, and that's bachelor's, master's, and PhDs. And then the other 5% are accounting, finance, those type of support roles. We also need a lot of construction workers. It'll be over 7,000 out on the site at one time, and it could likely be higher than that. But it's everything from plumbers and pipe fitters, IBEW electricians, sheet metal workers, basically any skilled craft that you can think of. We will need a lot of them on site. So the other thing I would mention, we are investing $50 million into Ohio, and then another $50 million nationwide. That's matched by $50 million from the NSF. So $150 million nationwide total. At least $50 million of that will be right here in Ohio to build out semiconductor programs and help support institutions as we're training this workforce for not just us, but for the entire semiconductor industry. We've awarded $17.7 million of that already, and a number of schools across Northwest Ohio are participating in that effort. So it's a great opportunity for schools to get involved and help support the growing industry that we know is coming here to Ohio. We also have 2 initiatives in the K through 12 space I wanted to highlight. Intel Future Skills is where Intel employees will go into the classroom, usually like a 3rd or 4th grade classroom, and do science projects. We really want to spark that interest and excitement around science and technology. And we think in 3rd and 4th grade, kids are deciding or ruling out various careers. We want them, as they're thinking about those career opportunities, to keep STEM in mind. And then we also launched earlier this year Moonshot Ohio, which is a partnership with the Ohio After School Network and the Intel Foundation, where we will do K through 12. It's after school STEM curriculum and training and materials for after school programs in Ohio. So it's a great opportunity for anyone across the state to participate. Intel, I've been there 9 months, and I can tell you that these awards are really true. It is one of the best places to work. It is a great company all around. One of the world's best employers for veterans, one of the best employers for diversity, one of the most responsible companies. We have a huge commitment to sustainability, and overall, just an incredible place. We are out and about in the community and across the state. We view this as a statewide project. That's one of the reasons I was up in Toledo for the lunch a month or so ago, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this today. We want the whole state to benefit from Intel's investment here in Ohio. The picture on the left, those are my 2 sons at a Halloween event last fall, and I use that because we take that cutout almost everywhere we go to show people what it's like being inside the fabs. And kind of, I still sometimes get asked the question, do y'all make computers? And it's, no, we make the chips that go inside of your computer. And then that's my colleague Emily on the right in a bunny suit, and I believe that's in our Arizona fab. So all of our technicians will wear that suit when they're in the fabs. So if you want to learn more about the project, the best place to go is intel.com/Ohio. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter on there, and that's we provide construction updates, what's going on, how to get involved. But there's also a link there on that page to sign up to learn more about becoming an Intel supplier. And There's an intake portal where anyone interested in providing materials for the construction or for our operations can provide all of their information. Now, there's no guarantee of business, but it does get you into our system. And if we're going to be purchasing items, you'll be in our system and should find out about that. So we have two separate teams. One's on the construction side, one's on the operations side. As I mentioned, Ohio will be mainly focused on construction for the next 3 to 5 years. But we are looking to grow our supplier footprint in Ohio, and we have a number of suppliers today in Ohio that are supplying our operations in Arizona or Oregon or other sites. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Joanne, who can talk a little bit more about some of our efforts specifically around the issue of supplier diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and talk about Intel's Supplier Diversity and Inclusion Program. We have a well-established, highly recognized program that I want to share with you some things about that. Next slide, please. So Intel has a unified One Intel strategy for our commitment to corporate social responsibility and sustainability. And we call it RISE. It's responsible, inclusive, sustainable, and enabling. So we want to, revolutionize how technology will improve health and safety, make technology fully inclusive, achieve carbon neutral computing, and then accelerate ways we progress through our technology. So, our corporate social responsibility report just came out. There's a lot of information there about all what we try to do as tech as a force for good. So it's on the Intel Intel.com's website if you're interested in learning more. Next slide. And supply chain has about a third of the goals, right, in these in sustainable and corporate responsibility. So from a responsible perspective, we're expanding our efforts beyond conflict-free minerals and creating new sourcing standards, scaling our supplier responsibility programs for human rights across 100% of our contracted tier 1 suppliers and high-risk tier 2. We're enabling greener and circular chemistry strategies. And again, we want to accelerate the ways we enable projects through our technology. Supplier diversity and inclusion is part of the inclusive pillar. And back in 2016, we made a commitment to spend $1 billion annually with global suppliers annually with global diverse suppliers. And we hit that early in 2019. So then after we hit that early, we became part of the RISE goals, and our goal is to hit $2 billion in diverse spends globally by 2030. Our vision is really to have a fully inclusive and world-class supply chain that values the spirit of innovation afforded through diverse communities. And one of our strong purpose is to cultivate diversity within the technology industry, specifically the semiconductor industry, and drive economic empowerment within diverse communities. When we first started our journey in supplier diversity, there wasn't a lot of our fellow travelers in the semiconductor industry. So in 2018, Intel, along with 3 of our largest suppliers, created what we call the Manufacturer Owners Diversity Group, the MOD working group, focused specifically on supplier diversity and inclusion. As part of SEMI, which is our industry organization, and now we showed them that they can have an inclusive supply chain, and we worked together and partnered together and showed how we built our program. And now it has over 70 corporations, diverse owned suppliers, and then NGOs as members, and we are collaborating really to have a inclusive supply chain in the semiconductor industry. As I said, our goal was to hit $2 billion by 2030. Our goal for 2023 is $1.6 billion. And we also have milestone targets and sub-goals, which is $500 million with women suppliers outside the US by 2025, $500 million minority-owned globally by 2023, which includes $250 million in US Black-owned suppliers by 2023. As I said, our program is global, so we have our program in 26 regions and countries where we operate, but there's a heavy focus in the US as well. So our progress, so how are we doing against that 2 billion goal? So I'm very excited to announce that in 2022, we hit 2.2 billion. So we hit our RISE goal 8 years early, and that's 15x of where we were when we started our program. And so we've, and we're striving to continue where there's still more work to do. We want to be more inclusive, include more suppliers and the opportunities to compete. So, and we also achieved our 800 million a year globally across minority-owned suppliers and our 250 million a year with U.S. Black-owned suppliers a year early. And we are on track to meet the third sub-goal. So a lot of effort, a lot of excitement that we were able to achieve that early, and we continue to strive to do more. So what do we consider a diverse supplier? So in our program, a diverse supplier is one that is 51% owned and operated by either a minority, a woman, people with disabilities, LGBTQ community, US veteran, or service disabled. And when we say certified, we mean that they're certified by a third-party organization that represents those. So for minority, it's the National Minority Supplier Development Council, Women's Business Enterprise National Council for Women. In the US, we connect International for Women outside the US, Disability In for people with disabilities, the National Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce for LGBTQ, and then the National Veterans Business Development Council for US veteran or service disabled. And the reason, we take these as opposed to any certification that might be self-certified, because these organizations really do the vetting, and they make sure not only is the company owned, but it's also controlled and operated by the diverse group, which is what we're striving for. And as I mentioned before, we really want to include the entire supply chain in our diversity program. So even though that we may have large suppliers that aren't diverse, we expect them to have a diverse supply chain. So we have a tier 1 supplier would be a company, diverse or not, who's awarded a contract directly from Intel. Tier 2 supplier is a company, diverse or not, who's awarded a contract by a tier 1 or prime. And we have a supplier diversity policy on our Intel supplier diversity page, which sets the expectation that our tier 1 non-diverse suppliers attempt to achieve 10% spends with diverse companies on Intel contracts. So we can there's two types of spends. There's direct spends, which we can trace back to the Intel contract with a diverse supplier. And then there's indirect spends where the payments may not, they may be made for some subcontracting that can't be traced back to specific work performed at Intel, like security service, landscaping services, cafeteria service, those types of things. So for instance, in Ohio, Intel's building a new fab, our first one in 40 years, as Kevin said, in Greenfield. And we've hired 2 general contractors. They're both non-diverse, but they've both committed to spending money with diverse suppliers. And so if they work with a plumbing company or a surveying company that's diverse, then they actually report those spends to Intel via a third-party portal. That's what we call our tier 2 spends. And then, like I said, if we have indirect, like cafeteria services, we can count those as well. But but that just shows that the suppliers are Intel's committed, and so is our supply chain committed to a diverse supply chain. So Kevin talked about the methods of engagement, the link to the intel.com/Ohio, and then the intake portal. So the intake portal, gets reviewed, and when we have RFPs, and our goal is to include at least one diverse supplier in every RFP. And so that's where we go. We look at that information to see if the supplier's capabilities match our needs. And then, we talked about the certifications that we take. Well, they're certifying Ohio affiliates of those organizations. So for minority, it's the Ohio Minority Supplier Development Council. And for women-owned businesses, it's the Women's Business Enterprise Council, ORV. So, I connected with these organizations as soon as we announced in Ohio to start talking about the diverse and women business ecosystem in the Ohio area, so we can understand where our opportunities are. And as you reach out to Intel, so I strongly encourage you to reach out and understand, what Intel's doing and, what capabilities we might need. Just coming to us and say, I want to do business with Intel, I want to be an Intel supplier, it's more helpful if you can communicate what solutions or core capabilities your company can provide. And so it's and that's, you can look at for more public information on our Intel newsroom website. But, we are committed to supplier diversity. We're building our first greenfield site. There's lots of opportunity to do things differently. We've engaged with the certifying organizations. I've engaged with many different organizations that support diverse suppliers. So as Kevin said, right now, we're focused on construction and construction suppliers. So in many cases, the trades, would work for our general contractor. So in many cases, you may be working on Intel business, Intel site, but you might be working for a general contractor. You might be working for one of our equipment manufacturers or the, integrated facilities management, various, tier one suppliers. But there is opportunity not only with Intel, but with our non-diverse tier one. And they have commitments again, as well, for an inclusive supply chain. So we're very excited and, want to learn more about, the diverse ecosystem in Ohio. And we have our supplier diversity page. It's, intel.com/supplier diversity if you want to learn more about our supplier diversity program. And I think with that, we can open it up to questions.
Ash, do you want folks to type in the chat, or what's the best way for Q&A? Are they sending them to you?
Yeah, you guys can absolutely raise your hand. You can go down to reactions and raise your hand, and then we can go from there.
I think Red Wolf Engineering has a question.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So I'm an engineering firm, an electrical engineer. And so I can imagine the design for this building and the whole site is probably complete. But I know in the construction process, there's as built, where at the end, we record how it was complete. A lot of times in construction, things are not done exactly how it is on the drawings initially. So if I want to get some of these opportunities to help out at the tail end, I understand I register online. But then what happens after that? I mean, does somebody reach out to us? Do they have some kind of interview process? Do you guys go to these prime contractors and tell them, okay, call this Red Wolf Engineering, or how does that work after you are registered?
So once you're registered, you'll get a letter acknowledging that that we received your registration. And then as opportunities come up, we go to that list of suppliers. We do provide lists to our, potential suppliers, to our general contractors. So it just depends on the timing of the need and, what RFPs are out there. But yes, we will be using that information to look for supplier capabilities when we have a need and an RFP.
And that's why I would say be as thorough as possible in that supplier intake portal, because when our general contractor, when our EPCs, engineering, procurement, construction firms, like a Bechtel, for example, who is building the fabs, when they need a product, they will look through that list of in that supplier intake portal and try to send the RFP to companies that match their needs. So I would encourage everyone to be as thorough as possible in that supplier intake portal to make sure that you're being captured for potential opportunities.
I would be thorough, but I would also be, make sure you're focused on your core competencies so that when they're searching for that very thing that you talked about within engineering, that they know that that's your core competency or that's what your interest is.
And a follow-up question to that is, so some of these prime contractors that you hired already, how are they being tracked for, I don't know if they had a certain percentage that they had to hire MBEs for, or WBEs, but are they being tracked, that the effort is being made and that they're actually doing that? Okay.
Yes, they report there's diverse spends through a third-party system that we have on a quarterly basis, and so we can track exactly how much they're spending. And they have the same requirements that we have, is that they have to be certified diverse suppliers by those same NGOs that I mentioned. But yes, they have to go in to this portal on a quarterly basis and share the supplier information and the diverse group and the certification.
And we announced some numbers in January of this year on the 1-year anniversary of our announcement that we were coming to Ohio. And like I mentioned, we didn't have the groundbreaking ceremony until September-ish of last year. But in that first year from when we announced to this January, 20% of our spends had been with diverse suppliers. So we do track that figure.
Thank you.
Matt Scott.
Hey, yeah, thanks. I work at a small business consulting company. So we're 50 people. We're in Toledo, and we're a software consulting company specialized like data integration, implementations, custom development. Is the best resource the intel.com/Ohio to see if there's opportunities to get engaged, or what do you guys recommend?
It is the best. It is the best place to go. And one thing to also note is that Intel is a global company. We have global procurement teams. So all our IT, we have an IT sourcing group, right? And one of the strengths of our program is that in all our sourcing groups, IT, marketing, factory, construction, anything, contingent workforce, we have supplier diversity champions. And so they know within their own sourcing organizations what the needs are going to be, what the RFPs are going to be. And when they want to include diverse suppliers in the RFP, they come to our team to help find candidates that will meet their capability. So it is definitely the best place to register, and to also, we also go to the NGOs, right? So if I was in Ohio, I would go to WheatBank ORV or OMSDC looking for the capabilities that we need if we were looking for someone in Ohio. So so we look at the certified suppliers there, and we also look at those who have completed our intake, and the intake will also tell us if a supplier is diverse and certified.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, or Ash, were there any that you received ahead of time that we haven't answered?
Yeah, so someone asked, will Intel be pre-purchasing electrical equipment like transformers, high voltage equipment, and other long lead time items?
So I don't know if we'll be pre-purchasing. As Kevin said, we're focused on construction for the foreseeable future, but we will start looking. We do have we will look at our roadmap. We will look at, we do consider lead times, and the timing of when we need things, or the time versus the timing when we need to order and get them. So that will be looked at, but I don't have any specifics on that at this point.
I don't either, and I'm also not sure if it would be us for some of that versus the utility that's providing some of that. So it just depends on what the specifics are, but I'm not positive.
Hi, Joanne and Kevin. This is Reese Petit with Peak Electric. I'm the one to answer that question, I think, earlier when I registered. So what we've seen in other large projects, not this large, but other large projects, is sometimes the engineering firms will recommend to the end user to purchase those longer lead time items before it goes to a Bechtel or your general contractor, because they're working on other things that maybe need to be happening quicker. But that was the question, because we've seen the utilities, right? We'll do some infrastructure, and then you take it from there. And some of those items might be maybe 3 years out, just because of the way the market is now.
I don't know specific to the electrical. I know the lead time on some of our longer lead time items has been decreasing in the last year or so. So it doesn't take us as long as it used to, and that's for some of our machinery as well. But if you want to follow up with me, Reese, I'm happy to check with our energy and utility folks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, as a follow-up, I can send all the attendees the link so you can learn more about the goals and initiatives and get your company registered in there. Anything else, Kevin or Joanne?
I would just say thanks so much for pulling this together and for all of the engagement with the Toledo Chamber. We really appreciate it. And again, from a workforce perspective, from a supplier perspective, I know we have a number of existing suppliers in Northwest Ohio and in Toledo itself. So we are, thrilled to be growing in Ohio, and I think that Northwest Ohio is going to benefit as well. We look forward to engage and continuing the engagement. And if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up afterwards, my email is just kevin.hoggett@intel.com, and feel free to reach out.
Yes, thank you for having us. And again, if you have questions on supplier diversity, I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me that way.
Sounds great. Well, thank you all so much.
Thanks, Ash.
Thank
See ya.
you.
Thank you.